Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the first podcast of the Diplomacy Law and Policy Forum. I have with us Ms. Ayesha, Malik. Oves, Anwar. We're both editors of the forum. And we wanted to take this first session and discuss what exactly the DLP Forum is, Diplomacy, Law and Policy, why we established it, and where we see it going in the next few months. So Ayesha, first of all, welcome. And
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. The DLP Forum, we established this very recently, and it's going to be coming out in the next few months with ever more additions and articles, and it's becoming a flourishing platform. But why did we actually set this up? What was the thinking behind it?
So it's going to be officially launched on the 12th of August, which is the anniversary of the Geneva Conventions. And we set it up to basically shape and, have a space for debate and dialogue on international humanitarian law, so the law of armed conflict, and diplomacy and policy. And so we're looking at these as very interconnected, intersectional themes, where we can have a very, very rich debate and contextualize it. So we wanted to have a lot of local voices talking about this, talking about humanitarian diplomacy, the law of armed conflict and policy, how they interconnect, and giving us a really contextualized understanding. So we start from Pakistan as well, and we start from the region and looking at it and connecting it with all of these international debates that we can see happening in the world today. So it's basically for students, policymakers, academics, experts, people like that who are interested in these interconnected themes and areas. And if you like watching the news, if you like reading about it, if you like the key questions facing the world today and want to know more about them, then this platform is really for you.
No, absolutely. And I think, some of the thinking that we had behind this was to be able to have a platform where we could discuss cross-cutting themes. Because I think one of the biggest problems we have in Pakistan, but also regionally, is that people work in silos. So whether you have academics in particular fields, they're simply working in those areas, policymakers, diplomats. Whereas the level of complexity in contemporary issues is far greater now than it was a few decades ago, and to be able to have a platform where these individuals and these entities and scholars from the region could come together and discuss these things, and especially in the region that we're in right now, I think a lot of problems that arises simply from the lack of debate that we can have with interlocutors in Afghanistan or India or Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. So I think that's one of the purposes of having a forum like this, and that's really why we're also encouraging a lot of people to contribute to the forum, because this is an open forum that we really want people to volunteer articles for, help write as part of the blog, join us for podcasts. And things like that. So I think those are some of the issues there. And secondly, I also think that, especially in Pakistan, whether it's the legal community or other community, we don't have a lot of public forums where we can bring about this debate. And so having, being able to add to the debate and just having a platform where people can openly express their views, I think that's something that is really important as well.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to have it be very interdisciplinary, because I think that even when we do teachings, when we do trainings, we often find that you have the IR people, the international relations people, and then you have the international lawyers, and they're kind of both just like watching each other and they're kind of like, oh, you don't understand this bit. And then the international relations people mention some concepts and they're like, you won't get this, you're lawyers. So it is about having that debate in a forum where people can then raise awareness, learn about all of these different concepts, and kind of come out with a richer understanding of all of them combined.
Absolutely, yeah.
So and the fact that we're kind of situating it with Pakistan and with the region in focus, but connecting it to very, very international issues. So these are issues that I think that the global south especially doesn't say enough on. So if we're talking about the law of armed conflict, or we're talking about the principle of proportionality, it's something that we've kind of not had enough debate coming from this area of the world in terms of how that should go forward, in terms of the importance of state practice, in terms of the importance of having a state position on this. And that is only created by academic rigor and academic debate.
Absolutely. And I think, you can't have academic debates centered away from the region, which is most impacted by a lot of the the rules that are established for whether it's armed conflict or diplomacy or negotiations in these areas. So I think it's extremely important that we get local voices, people who are directly impacted by these issues, and scholars who are so rooted in the culture and the society that is most impacted by this, being able to speak up on these issues. So I really think that's one of the best things about this forum is going to the source and highlighting voices that would not otherwise be heard. And it's not like we have a dearth of scholars or people who can discuss this. We have them throughout the region, and some excellent scholars, in Pakistan, in India, and in the region. It's just that I don't think we have enough emphasis on bringing these voices to the public or to the academic community.
I think given both of us have been teaching, you see that in moot court competitions, right? Yeah. You see people get incredibly into these IHL nitty-gritty, very refined kind of debates. And then what happens at the end, they end up going into litigation or they go into another area of law and they never look at that ever again. And I think the only people then who remain, who've done this for decades, there's a small handful of people. So it's about encouraging kind of us to have like a plethora of lawyers or policymakers or anyone who know enough about this area of law who can come speak about it authoritatively and just have a deeper understanding of it.
Absolutely. I think that's a really important point, and that wasn't really in my talking points, but is the fact that having forums like this can help support developing careers in this field. So like if you are going to be promoting, if you want to promote international law, better adherence with international obligations, you need the capacity domestically to be able to understand and implement those, right? Yeah. But the only way you're going to have that is if there's a market for these individuals. So why would universities teach a course which doesn't allow employability or improve, employment prospects? So I think one of this is part of the, DLP Forum is part of the ecosystem that will help develop a market for individuals who can come in, think tanks, having the international expertise and then welcoming international law, budding international law experts come in, join them and, build careers from there. So I think that's also a very important point that you raised.
I think particularly as well, when I look at the concept of diplomacy and humanitarian diplomacy, the whole idea of, you trying to persuade policymakers or persuade people to help people in need. And I think, one of the greatest diplomatic feats recently, in the recent past, has been Obama's Iran deal, which was really touted as like this incredible moment for diplomacy, given these two warring entities. And then you had recently the nuclear ban treaty. Only 51 countries have ratified it, but one of the key provisions of that was this focus on disarmament diplomacy, that those states which have ratified this treaty will then go out of their way to persuade other states to also do so and to give up their nuclear weapons. And I think that that's going to be very, very important, given how much we're going to see states receding from the international plane. Fewer and fewer states are now willing to go out of their way to ratify treaties. They don't want any more international obligations. So then how do you bring international law to the fore? How do you encourage states to still engage with that? And I think it's going to be through diplomacy in the future. Absolutely.
I think, a good point that you've raised is that while people do work in silos, these issues can't be easily, they're not easily severable.
Yeah.
Diplomacy and international humanitarian law or international law in general is part of diplomacy.
Yeah.
They're a parcel that go together. And so it becomes very difficult to have a debate, where you're just an IR specialist or just an international law specialist.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think this is what that forum tries to do. It tries to bridge the gap between these entities that have or are emerging in these regions, in our region, separately. Almost, and then bring them together. So I think that's a great point that you made there. So Ayesha, I wanted to ask you, how is this forum set up? Like, what are we asking people to contribute towards, or how is it set up essentially?
So we're going to be hosting a bunch of articles, videos, podcasts, infographics where we talk about a specific theme every month.
Okay.
So we're starting off with an introduction to international humanitarian law. So we're talking about the cardinal principles. We're talking about status, the classification of conflicts. So kind of basic issues in international humanitarian law, which we will then build upon in subsequent months. So the themes after that will be means and methods of warfare. We're going to look at urbanization of conflict. We're going to look at climate change and conflict. We're going to be and even in means and methods of warfare, for instance, we're going to be looking at cyber warfare. We're going to be looking at armed conflict in space. We know that all of these billionaires are now trying to head to Mars and stuff. So what does that mean for the weaponization really of space, autonomous weapons, and so it's a lot of things will come in to every theme every month, and we'll just build upon that every month. So you have a great center for a bunch of academic articles and podcasts and videos, which you can go to if you're looking at anything related to any of these themes.
That's brilliant, and I really like the fact that it's an exciting time in IHL. For international humanitarian law, the law of armed conflict, a lot is happening, right? Just look at the advances in drone warfare and how it's completely changed the battlefield, right? So how is the law going to catch up, and how is the law going to develop relating to that? And then you have, artificial intelligence coming in, cyber warfare, all of these elements. So I think it's great that our themes are moving with these issues, and will be progressing as these themes, as these issues progress as well. And I think one of the best things about the structuring of the DLP Forum is that we want to make this as visually interesting, as intellectually stimulating as we possibly can. So the art of telling a story or explaining a viewpoint, we want to do that as effectively as possible using whatever means we now have in this modern contemporary world. So whether it is through blogs or through podcasts or through infographics and striking visuals, that is something that is part and parcel of this. And we're very grateful to teaming up with the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, to be able to allow us to do this and bring this portal or platform online.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the focus for us is on creating products and creating academic resources, which will be very comprehensive, but at the same time, very simple. Yeah. So if you are sitting on your couch at home watching the news and wondering how somebody working in Langley, Virginia, can I sit there, play on their joystick and send a drone into Afghanistan, and wondering, what does the law say about this? That is what we're going to try to explain to you over the coming months. What laws apply? What do they say? If you're wondering about Israel and Gaza, and you're wondering about how that works, what even does proportionality mean? We're going to be talking to you about that. And I hope that the way we're going to come at it is going to be something which is very analytical and also very critical. Yeah. Because I think one of the main issues with IHL is that because a lot of the topics, a lot of the principles sound like you would understand them very easily. So proportionality, for instance, it actually means something very, very complicated, and we can't figure out what it means in most cases. And so often you have, especially human rights organizations, sitting there and being like, "This is disproportionate because a lot of civilians died." And the fact is that under IHL, it's not about the number of civilians dying, it's about the importance of that military objective. Absolutely. And so, and the balance that exactly. So something that can kill 3 civilians could be disproportionate. Something that can kill 100 civilians cannot be. And I think it's about having a very analytical, very critical approach to that, where we look at these things and we don't just blanket say statements like this is disproportionate. We look at that in a lot more detail. Yeah, absolutely. And I think holding, people who make statements, whether it's say a spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Forces or a spokesperson for another army, holding them accountable as well, because not every attack can be justified just through diplo talk and legalese and going through that. It requires analysis, which needs to be done at some forum. And for us in Pakistan, I think a lot of the debate gets confused when it gets to us, and we're not easily able to sift through, what is propaganda, what is some other form of, non-neutral, a source of news for us. So I think trying to be as neutral, as impartial in this entire debate, and bringing these issues, discussing the law as it is, for our audience, I think is very important. I think that's what the forum really needs to do. Yeah, and I think it's really important to see that every statement made by, say, an American congressman or an Israeli spokesperson about an attack on Gaza has been sifted through. Every single word has been looked at by God knows how many lawyers. Exactly. And I remember I was at a conference last year, and they were talking about how it's really, really sad that in American space diplomacy, you have fewer people working there than you have in the average McDonald's. And I was sat there thinking, in Pakistan, you have in the entirety of international law fewer people than probably work in an average McDonald's. And that is something that needs to change. That culture needs to change. Absolutely. And the focus on these as important issues. which are incredibly important for you as a state on the world stage, but also very important for for individuals on a sense of individual awareness. Like I'm sure the average Pakistani, the average person in South Asia watches the news and wants to understand these concepts better, and also understands that, there are now more and more alternative viewpoints that are coming out. And so you have the rise of social media, you have the decline of normal media. And what does that mean? And which voices are then going to speak out and talk to people? And I think that this can be a forum which does that, which explains these concepts and also tells them in a way that is, comprehensible, also simple.
And I think it's even more important, especially in this age of disinformation and fake news, where people have a source to go to which is reliable.
Yeah.
And we're not going to say that we are the most reliable source. Definitely check everything that we say or anyone says. But you need to have certain places where you can go and know that you're not going to be spun or you're not going to get the news in a particular way.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. Ayesha, one final question that I wanted to ask you is, where do you want to see this forum go? Where do you want to see this forum develop or want to see this forum develop into?
What I really want is to see people be like, oh, I wonder what that is. And then be like, oh, I need to go and check on the DLP forum and see what everyone is saying about this. Mm-hmm. I want people to be talking about the podcast. I want people to be commenting on them, criticizing what we're saying even, or, giving us feedback, that kind of thing. And I want to see a lot of students, policymakers, academics use this forum as like a resource center. Because I want it to be the kind of place that you go and you say, oh, I wonder, what they're saying about this latest attack in Gaza. I wonder what they're saying about hypersonic missiles and whether they can comply with IHL. So stuff like that. That's what I really want this to be.
And another thing that I wanted to discuss was we're trying to make this platform as democratic as possible, and part of that is encouraging people to talk to us, to contribute to their analysis, their opinions, to our blogs, to the articles that we publish. You'll have an excellent editorial team, if I might say so myself, and join us for our podcasts and view our podcasts, leave comments on that. And so I'm really happy that this forum is now coming about. So definitely contribute to dlpforum.org. The website will be up on August 12th.
Yeah, launching August 12th.
Launching on August 12th. And we really look forward to having a successful launch of this and you being part of the journey for this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.